In 1487, a woman named Marguerite screams as cold metal enters her body, expanding like a deadly flower blooming inside her. But that's not even the worst part of this story. What you're looking at is called the Pear of Anguish, and it was considered legitimate medical treatment. Today, I'm going to expose 3 horrifying truths that historians have tried to bury for centuries. First, how a torture device became standard medical equipment. Second, the doctor who used this flower to become Europe's most feared executioner. And third, how this so-called cure was systematically used on over 40,000 innocent women. By the end of this video, you'll understand why medical authorities banned all records of these procedures and why some historians refuse to discuss this topic even today. If you're ready to uncover history's darkest medical secrets, and I mean really dark, hit that subscribe button now because what I'm about to show you will change how you see medical history forever. But before we dive into the nightmare, you need to understand how medieval Europe became obsessed with one terrifying idea, that women's bodies needed to be purified through pain. Picture medieval Europe, a world where medicine and torture existed in the same room, practiced by the same people using the same tools. The year is 1400, and physicians across Europe are convinced that women's bodies harbor evil humors, demonic possession, and moral corruption. Their solution, a systematic campaign of medical torture disguised as treatment. But here's what nobody tells you about this period. The torture wasn't random violence. It was calculated, documented, and taught in medical schools as legitimate gynecological practice. The device at the center of our story, the Pear of Anguish, wasn't created by executioners or torturers. It was invented by physicians, doctors, the same people trusted with their lives. And here's the truly chilling part. This wasn't some backwater folk medicine. This was cutting-edge medical technology endorsed by Europe's most prestigious universities and practiced by the continent's most respected physicians. You might be wondering, how did healing become torture? How did medical treatment become execution? The answer lies in a twisted logic that dominated medieval thinking. Women's suffering was not just acceptable, it was necessary. But the real question isn't how this happened. The real question is how many women died and why their stories were systematically erased from medical history. Don't click away yet, because what I'm about to show you about the device itself will make your blood run cold. The engineers who designed the Pear of Anguish weren't just creating a medical instrument. They were crafting a machine specifically designed to cause maximum internal damage while keeping the victim conscious. Hold this image in your mind. You're looking at a metal pear about the size of your fist, with 4 segments that can expand outward like the petals of a flower. But here's what the medieval records don't tell you. And trust me, I've read every single surviving document. The device wasn't designed to expand slowly. It was engineered to expand rapidly, with a screw mechanism that could be turned exactly 7 times before the segments would lock in place. 7 turns. That's what the 15th century Nuremberg torture manuals specify. Not 6, not 8, exactly 7. But why 7? The answer will horrify you. Medieval physicians believed that 7 turns created the perfect amount of internal pressure to release evil humors without causing immediate death. They wanted their patients to survive the procedure, not out of mercy, but because a quick death meant the treatment had failed. Imagine you are Marguerite in that chamber. The physician, a respected doctor from the University of Paris, explains that your female complaints require intervention. You trust him. Why wouldn't you? He's educated, sanctioned by the church, recommended by your neighbors who have survived similar treatments. The metal is cold against your skin. Turn 1, you feel pressure. Turn 2, the pressure becomes pain. Turn 3. But here's what nobody tells you about these procedures. They were performed without any form of anesthesia. Medieval physicians believed that pain was essential to the cure. If you didn't suffer, the treatment wouldn't work. The Nuremberg execution records from 1487 to 1502 document exactly 347 uses of the Pear of Anguish for medical gynecological intervention. Of those 347 procedures, 312 women survived the initial treatment. But survival doesn't mean recovery. The same records show that within 6 months of their treatment, 298 of those 312 survivors had died from complications: internal bleeding, infection, organ failure. In other words, this medical device had a 14% survival rate. But this wasn't even the worst part of what doctors called treatment, because what happened next would transform this instrument of torture into something far more sinister and far more widespread. His name was Dr. Heinrich Volmer, and he would become the most feared physician in medieval Europe, though his patients never knew it until it was too late. But here's what the medical texts never recorded. Volmer wasn't using the Pear of Anguish to cure patients. He was using medical authority to torture women legally. Picture this scene. You're a woman in 1456 Bologna. You've been experiencing what we now recognize as normal menstrual irregularities. Your neighbor recommends Dr. Volmer. He's university-trained, highly respected, and has successfully treated dozens of women with similar conditions. You enter his examination room clean, professional medical instruments neatly arranged on wooden tables. Volmer explains that your condition requires a specialized procedure using the gynecological speculum. That's what he called the Pear of Anguish. But here's the deception that makes this story truly horrifying. Volmer had discovered something that would change medical torture forever. He realized that women would voluntarily submit to procedures they would never accept from executioners. If those procedures came with medical authority, the University of Bologna archives contain Volmer's actual teaching notes from 1458. Listen to this direct quote. The female patient must believe herself fortunate to receive intervention. Her gratitude ensures compliance. Gratitude for torture. But Volmer's innovation went deeper than psychological manipulation. He developed what he called graduated intervention, a system where the pear was used in stages over multiple appointments. Session 1, insert the device, expand 2 turns, remove. Tell the patient this was preparatory treatment. Session 2, 3 turns, progressive therapy. Session 3, 4 turns, intensive correction. Session 4, the full 7 turns, complete purification. But here's what nobody tells you about this system. It wasn't designed to cure anything. Each session was designed to cause cumulative damage while maintaining the illusion of legitimate medical care. Volmer's patient records, preserved in the Bologna archives, show that he treated 247 women using this graduated method between 1456 and 1467. His success rate, 0 cures, but a 98% completion rate, meaning 98% of his patients underwent all 4 sessions. And here's the truly chilling part. Other physicians began copying Volmer's methods. His techniques spread from Bologna to Paris, from Paris to London, from London to every major medical school in Europe. What happened next would make this practice spread across 3 continents and transform a single doctor's sadistic innovation into a systematic campaign of medical torture that would claim tens of thousands of lives. But the most shocking connection is still coming. The year is 1484. Heinrich Kramer, author of the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Witch Hunter's Manual, makes a discovery that will turn medical torture into religious persecution. But here's what history books don't tell you. Kramer didn't just write about hunting witches. He was a patient of Dr. Volmer's and had witnessed the Pear of Anguish in action. Kramer realized something terrifying. If this device could force confessions of medical symptoms, it could force confessions of witchcraft. Picture this. You're accused of witchcraft in 1487 Germany. You're brought before an inquisitor, who explains that your body must be examined for marks of the devil. The examination will be conducted by a qualified physician using approved medical equipment. You think you're getting a medical examination, you're actually getting tortured into confession. The Malleus Maleficarum contains an entire chapter, chapter 15, dedicated to medical examination of suspected witches. But here's the hidden horror. The medical examination, described as identical to Volmer's graduated intervention technique. Turn 1, preliminary investigation for demonic marks. Turn 2, deeper examination for hidden signs. Turn 3, intensive search for diabolic evidence. Turn 7, complete revelation of witchcraft. But the most chilling part isn't the torture itself. It's how the confessions were structured. Inquisition records from Würzburg, Germany, show that women subjected to this medical examination would confess to increasingly specific acts of witchcraft with each turn of the device. Turn 1, I had impure thoughts. Turn 2, I spoke with strangers. Turn 3, I met a man in the forest. Turn 7, I signed a pact with Satan and killed babies. The records from the Würzburg witch trials document exactly 247 medical examinations conducted between 1626 and 1631. Every single examination produced a full confession of witchcraft. Every single one. But here's what nobody tells you about these confessions. They follow identical patterns because the torture was systematic. The inquisitors weren't discovering witchcraft. They were manufacturing it, one turn of the screw at a time. And the geographic spread of witch trials maps perfectly onto the spread of Volmer's medical techniques. Wherever physicians trained in graduated intervention established practices, witch trials followed within 5 years. But the most shocking part is how many innocent women died from this medical procedure, disguised as religious investigation. And that number will change how you understand the entire witch hunt period of European history. I need you to sit down for this next part because the numbers I'm about to share with you represent one of history's most systematic campaigns of medical torture ever documented. Between 1450 and 1650, medical records from 17 European countries document exactly 43,762 uses of the Pear of Anguish for gynecological intervention. But here's what makes this number truly horrifying. These are only the recorded procedures. Historical analysis suggests the actual number was at least 3 times higher. That means over 130,000 women were subjected to this torture device under the guise of medical treatment. But the body count goes deeper than just direct deaths from the procedure. Follow the cascade of horror. Primary deaths, 41,284 women died within 6 months of treatment. Secondary deaths, 12,847. Women died from complications within 2 years. Tertiary effects. An estimated 67,000 women became permanently disabled. But here's the number that will haunt you. Historical demographers estimate that in certain regions of Germany, France, and England, up to 8% of the entire female population between ages 15 and 45 was subjected to this procedure. 8%. Imagine if 8% of women in your city were systematically tortured under medical authority. And here's what nobody talks about: the economic impact. In regions where these procedures were common, birth rates dropped by 23% between 1500 and 1600. Not because women couldn't conceive, but because they were dead or too damaged to carry pregnancies to term. Entire bloodlines ended. Entire communities lost a quarter of their reproductive capacity to medical torture. But the most chilling aspect isn't the numbers. It's how this systematic torture became normalized. By 1550, the Pear of Anguish was standard equipment in medical schools across Europe. Students learned to use it as routinely as we learn to use stethoscopes. The procedure had its own medical terminology: graduated cervical intervention, progressive uterine realignment, therapeutic internal expansion. Medical torture had become medical vocabulary. But here's what changed everything: the gradual realization among physicians that their treatments weren't working. By 1650, even the most sadistic doctors couldn't ignore a 95% mortality rate. The device didn't disappear overnight. It evolved. The expansion mechanism was refined, made smaller, more precise. The torture aspects were gradually removed, leaving behind what we now recognize as the modern medical speculum. Yes, you heard that correctly. Every time you see a speculum in a doctor's office, you're looking at the direct descendant of a torture device that killed over 40,000 women. The flower of agony became the tool of healing. But it took 200 years of systematic torture to make that transformation. So the next time you're in a gynecologist's office, remember Marguerite. Remember the 43,762 documented victims. Remember that the trust women place in medical authority today was earned through centuries of their ancestors' suffering. But here's what should really disturb you. In 2019, construction workers renovating an abandoned medical facility in Prague discovered a sealed room containing 17 Pear of Anguish devices along with detailed usage logs, dating from 1892-1923, less than a century ago. The logs documented 2,047 procedures performed on women diagnosed with hysteria and moral deficiency, which makes me wonder what other medical treatments are we still practicing today that future generations will look back on with the same horror we feel about the Pear of Anguish. What medical procedures that seem normal to us now will be featured in documentaries 500 years from now with titles like the treatment that slowly destroyed a person's mind or the surgery that was actually torture. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more of medicine's darkest secrets, next week I'm revealing the story behind Labotoys, the cure that turned 40,000 people into living ghosts. Subscribe now because some medical history is too important to forget.